Okay, we're back. Sorry, I know that first one was kind of short, but there's a 10-minute time cap on the program I use, so I have to make sure I get all these things in. So we're going to take a couple slides looking at the black codes and their impact and talk a little bit about what they were like and what they did and how people live with them. Here's the stuff you have to write down. You might want to get some extra stuff here, especially if you don't know what some of the words mean. Kind of a good idea. So black codes, again, were rules that governed the conduct of freedmen and only freedmen. They did not apply to white people in any way, shape, or form. If you guys remember the other day when you did the ThingLink assignment, you looked at some different black codes. The first thing to note about these is that freedmen or African Americans could only have rights under certain conditions. And that condition was that a white person gave them a right. Like, for instance, if it was illegal in this classroom to have anything but water to drink, but I decided to bring you guys all Gatorade or orange juice or chocolate milk or whatever it is that you like to drink, I'm giving you the right to do that. However, it was a little bit tricky in the South because I could say, okay, there's nothing in this classroom but water, bring you guys Gatorade, and then when Miss Tebow walked in the room, go, oh, look, they're all breaking the rule. They should all be suspended. If you were African American, you didn't really always know who you could trust. Getting a little deeper and a little bit more specific, African American people couldn't testify against whites, so they couldn't be witnesses to crimes. So if you imagine for a second, let's say the classroom that you're in right now, let's say everybody's African American, you're a former slave. Obviously, your job skill is that you work in a field. And so after the Civil War is over and the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery, you get a job working in a field for a few pennies a day. And if a white person walked in the room and went, my name's Chris Seep, and this is my gun, and I pulled out a gun, and I said, my name is Chris Seep, and I'm going to shoot, and I named one of the people in the room, and I said, again, my name is Chris Seep, this is my gun, I'm going to do this, and I aimed the gun, and I said, 3, 2, 1, bang, pulled the trigger. Technically, even though 20 people witnessed a crime, there's no one that the police are going to talk to. So when the police show up, I can blame the crime on anybody. And when it comes to the court date, I'm the only witness that can testify in court. To make matters worse, African American people weren't allowed to serve on juries. And so if you were African American and you were accused of a crime, it was generally going to be 9 to 11 white men who were going to decide your fate. African American men were not allowed to vote. This takes away a lot of power. It also means that African American people couldn't hold office. And finally, on that second click, they weren't allowed to join a militia or an army. And the reason for that is simple. Southern whites thought it was a really bad idea to give African American people a gun. The theory was that they were going to go out and they were going to shoot their former owner. These laws promote segregation. Segregation is where people are split based on some criteria. Technically, you can be split male-female. We can split you based on race. We can split you based on age. The difference is when we talk about segregation and Reconstruction, it was done for a reason that was negative. Sometimes in classrooms, people are segregated for behavior reasons, not necessarily the worst thing. When you were younger, you might have been segregated into different reading groups based on your reading level. The attempt there was to get you to be a better reader. But if we took a race of people and said, oh, you have to go in this other room and you don't get good stuff and you don't get a teacher, that's obviously segregation for a negative reason. Imagine for a second the 2 drinking fountains outside the door. The one that's shorter is actually short because it's handicap accessible. It has nothing to do with the height of people. But imagine one had a sign over it that said whites only. And out of that drinking fountain came the cold, filtered, nice water that you're used to. And out of the other one, there's a sign that says coloreds only. And out of that comes basically the equivalent of warm Monashot water. That's what the black codes did, is they promoted behavior like that in the South. African American people weren't allowed to eat in certain restaurants or attend movie theaters later in things. There were no movie theaters during Reconstruction. Freedmen could be jailed for being unemployed. If you didn't have a job, you could be thrown in jail for up to a year. And so if you were a freedman, you weren't allowed to voice displeasure with your boss. You weren't allowed to take a day off for being sick. If the boss said you were going to work 7 days a week for 16 hours a day, you had no recourse, because if your boss fired you, you'd be sent to jail. That boss could also hold the pay of a freedman for a period of time of up to a year. So again, let's say that you were going to get paid this Friday. This Friday is like the 21st, and I was your boss. I looked at you and said, well, we'll pay you on September 21st, 2019. If you complained, I fire you, you go to jail, and then you're never going to get that money. Unfortunately, that meant that freedmen didn't have any money, and so they had to go to people that did, their boss. Their boss would offer to lend them money, and in exchange, they couldn't leave their job until they were able to pay that person back, which often meant that people were kept in the state of semi-slavery. African American people couldn't afford a place to live, so their boss said, "Oh, you can live here with me, and oh, I can feed you, and you can have this food." Well, the place they lived were their former slave quarters, and the food that they were eating was basically the same thing they were given as a slave. It was just another form of slavery. The only difference was that you were at least told you were free, and the government believed that you were free, but not in the South. The last slide, and I would highly recommend pausing this because I'm going to go through it kind of quick, is obviously these black codes irritated the freedmen. And they tried to hold secret meetings to make sure that they could get these things taken care of, get rid of them somehow. But then the South made it illegal for more than 5 freedmen to be in a room at the same time, and so those secret meetings became illegal and could be thrown in jail. There's actually a case in Mississippi where 30 African American people were trapped inside a church having a meeting about the black codes, and the KKK came and nailed the doors and windows shut and torched the building with everybody inside. 30 people were murdered. No one went to jail. Radical Republicans, Northerners that wanted to punish the South, were outraged by these things, and they started to push for African American people to have full citizenship and full voting rights. They also wanted to punish the Southern states that did these things. And basically, the everlasting impact of the black codes was it caused a further divide. It caused the Northerners to think way less of the Southerners, and it caused a fracture in that relationship that was even deeper than it went. And it caused the readmission of the states to the Union to be slowed. Again, you probably need to pause the slide if you want to write down everything. If you think you can get those things down, that's great. Kind of the key things on this slide are the people's opinions and what a radical Republican is, and that's in the parentheses behind it. Again, if you have any questions, please ask me when I get back. That's all you have to do for notes today. Now you should get going on the map assignment that's due by the end of class. Have a good day, you guys.